Hello and welcome back to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. Today we're going to have a really fun topic for you as we'll be discussing 10 of my most ideal fits for the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's a few players that I've fallen in love with this draft cycle, so we're going to take a look at them. We're going to see who they are, what their strengths are, even some of the weaknesses, and how they fit with this team. So we'll go ahead and get started, but before we do that, we're going to be showing draft profiles on here from the Draft Network. Not necessarily all the notes are going to come from that, but it'll give you an idea of who these guys are. Try to have them up on screen for you. So with that said, let's jump into our first guy. So we're going to start off with our first guy, and this will really go in ascending order throughout the players. So we'll finish with the one I like the most. You'll see him on the very right up here. So we'll start with Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson. So to me, Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson, he's a great fit with the Jacksonville Jaguars because of the play style he has, the position that he can play, and just the fact that this is a man coverage corner. You look at Mike Caldwell's defense, you look at what he asks from his corners, he wants man-to-man. That's the way he wants to play. And unfortunately, this last year, as good as some of the players were, we didn't really have the personnel to do that to the fullest. I mean, Trey Herndon, although he played pretty admirably for being thrown in the slot like he was, he's not a guy that you can trust to go man-to-man. So, Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson makes a lot of sense for me, especially as a third round or fourth round selection for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had 3 interceptions, as you'll see here, this last season, 3 pass deflections. He was a big part of the TCU defense. This is a team that, although they did get blown out in the national championship, they way overexceeded what people expected. They weren't supposed to make it. They weren't supposed to be in the playoffs. They weren't supposed to beat Michigan, yet they did. And so here we are, we're evaluating him. He's a huge part of that. And so, you know, as far as some of his strengths and issues, he's got good technical skills. He knows how to play the position really well. The 2 issues you're going to get with him, the biggest one is going to be size. And the second one is going to be that this is a guy who's either going to make the big play or he's going to give up the big play. So it's kind of similar to what you saw with Andre Cisco when he came to the Jaguars. 3rd round selection, you know, a guy who had all the potential to get turnovers and to be a big impact safety, but he also gave up a ton of big plays. Yet, you know, in his second year, we didn't really ever see a play where Andre Cisco just completely failed or gave up like a huge gain. I mean, I'm sure you could find maybe one, but it wasn't something that stood out this last year. And so for Hodges-Tomlinson, that's probably going to be something he's just going to have to work on for a year or two to get out of his game and to just fix. But if that's your big issue and size is the only other one, he makes a ton of sense for the slot. And not only that, but if you're in a pinch and you have Tyson Campbell or Darius Williams go down in the year, you can move Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson outside if needed. It's not ideal. I mean, it's not what you want to do, but you have the option. And you're probably going to bring back Trey Herndon, so you can always throw him back in the slot if needed. So, to me, this is a player who makes a ton of sense. He's a big competitor. He's going to fit this defense really well. He fits what Mike Caldwell wants to do. He fits the mentality. He doesn't have off-the-field issues. And so the question is, will the Jaguars select a player to play slot corner who does not have the size to go play outside? Because we know this team cares a lot about size. They care about the athleticism and the frame and all of those things. And if you don't fit them, sometimes they're just not going to look that closely at you. And we see it in their selections. They're always choosing these guys that have the ability, but have to refine their game, have to improve things, they have to develop, quite frankly. Trayvon Walker is the chief example of that. So that's the only thing I could see preventing Hodges-Tomlinson from going to the Jags, other than obviously another team selecting him earlier. But maybe he falls because of size. And if he falls, he'll just go higher on the board from what's remaining for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Next guy, Kenny McIntosh. So for me, this is my favorite running back in the draft, and I think the best fit for this team. Kenny McIntosh, first thing you'll need to know about him, he is the lead receiver for all running backs in college football this last year, had over 500 yards. He is not only a receiving threat out of the backfield either. Kenny McIntosh even played outside for the Georgia Bulldogs this last year. He's done a lot on that team. And, you know, for the Jaguars who talked about moving ETN out as a receiver, you know, Urban Meyer was huge on that. He wanted to get him involved as an offensive weapon. And even after that year, Doug Peterson talked about it. It hasn't really happened, but this is a guy who can already do all of that. And as well for Kenny McIntosh, he as a player, you know, although he has not had a ton of reps at the position or really dominated as the number one guy on the Bulldogs or any team, he has the upside to be a number one running back. So you like that. If ETN goes down, you can always split the load with him and Hasty if needed. But he just fits really well as a number two guy. Just being a dynamic weapon on this offense, you know Doug Pearson can find use for that. He's got good size. The one issue that you will find with him, same as ETN, he struggles at the pass protection. And so, with that said, you know, maybe Hasty is viewed as your pass protector. I'd have to do research into how he performed with that. But you like what Kenny McIntosh would bring to this team. Say in the late third or the middle of the fourth. I think that's good value for this player. And so he's someone I'd love to select. I think he would bring an entirely new dynamic to the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. And you got to stress defenses out. You got to give them multiple ways that you can beat them. So that's why I like Kenny McIntosh a lot. We'll move on to our next guy, Will McDonald. So Will McDonald, this is a defensive end from Iowa State. You also know another player from Iowa State we'll probably talk about again this offseason, Xavier Hutchinson. Another name you should like. He's from Jacksonville. He is a receiver that could probably start in the NFL right off the bat. And if not, you can develop him. And he should be someone you could rely on. So, another name to be familiar with, but we're going to talk about a different guy from Iowa State. Now, Will McDonald, he's got a lot of time in college. He's got 50 games under his belt. He's, despite that, more of an underdeveloped pass rusher. He's got a lot of potential, but you got to see a lot of that potential shown a week ago when the Senior Bowl happened. He played really well there. He showed that his pass rush arsenal has increased. A step he's going to have to take, though, still. He needs to add size on. He's, I think, 235 right now. We'll actually see that down here. I believe. Yes, 235. Probably needs to put on about 20 pounds, something like that. But he's got a lot of speed. He's known as a speed rusher. And I think when you look at what the Jaguars have already, if you want to spend the day 2 pick, ideally a third rounder, on Will McDonald, I think it's a good move because you can develop him and you can play him mainly on pass rushing downs to start out. You let him get used to the NFL. You give him time learning behind a pretty good group of guys. And I think Will McDonald could see a career very similar to, if not better than, what Dawand Smoot has had. Dawand Smoot's very similar situation. This is the guy they developed in the 3rd round. Hopefully I got the round right, but he's like day 2, and they developed him. He's been around, I think, about 5 or 6 years now, and he nearly led the team in sacks last year. So I mean, that's how you can see Will McDonald as well. Now, we'll watch a clip from the Senior Bowl practices here. We'll have a few of these spread out through the video. Not all Senior Bowl, but college highlights. So let's watch Will McDonald at work. So, first of all, this is Will right here. He's lined up against Darnell Wright, who's a offensive tackle, I believe, for the Texas Longhorns. He's a second or third round prospect right now. It's about where he's viewed, day 2. He's a pretty good guy. So, this isn't just, bad talent he's going up against. So we'll go ahead and watch this. So you see he's got good bend, get around the outside pretty well. You'll see the exact opposite on this next play. All right, here's the next rep. So you see the spin move there, getting inside. It's entirely different. And if you get a defensive end or edge rusher, whichever you want to call them, that can diversify what they're doing on the field, keep the offensive tackle on his toes, that's huge. That's a big part of the game. And doing that, you're going to catch him off guard once in a while. You're going to get more pressures, and you're going to be more successful as an edge rusher. So let's go to the next guy, Clark Phillips. So Clark Phillips, he is an extremely competitive player. As you can see with the stats here, he's a playmaker. 6 interceptions. I'm assuming the 2 touchdowns are off the interceptions, probably pick sixes. Maybe one's from a fumble. But he's a guy that he's going to change the tide in games. He knows this position extremely well. He's played outside a lot. However, as you see down here, he's got experience in the slot. He can move there, and that's exactly what you're going to ask him to do if he comes to this team. So, right off the bat, you're starting him at slot corner. He's, as well as Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson, he's a man coverage specialist, which you got to love. That's what you're looking for on this team. So, you have that fit, and you know that if a guy goes down outside, just like we talked about with Hodges-Tomlinson once again, he can move out, and he can cover there if you need it. So, you got to love all that. But the one thing I'm going to mention that probably won't be talked about very much is the team he's on. And you look at the history of that team these last couple of years, the Utah Utes. So, same team that Devin Lloyd came from. And if you're not familiar with the whole situation that happened at Utah the last couple of years, I highly recommend you go read up on it. There's a video on it about Devin Lloyd, him coming into the draft. Maybe I can link it in the YouTube video, but if I don't, just look it up. It's worth your time. It's about a 20-minute watch. But on this team, they had 2 people who were shot, victims of gun violence, and it was just really terrible what happened. And what was crazy about it wasn't all at once, but it was separate. They had it happen to the first guy. Another player chose to wear his jersey number in honor of him and ended up dying after him being shot. And so, when you read up on that, obviously make sure you get all the details right. I'm saying this from memory, so I apologize if anything's off, but the point is that there was a lot for that team to have to work through. And that program, despite what had happened in losing those star players and the emotional impact that had on them, they ended up putting together one of the best seasons in their program history. They had guys step up as leaders on that team, Devin Lloyd being the biggest of them, and they ended up winning their first conference championship for that team. First time ever in Pac-12. And I believe they've been around over 100 years, so it was a big deal. And so when I look at any player that comes from that team this year and the next year, I have to consider that because you know that they went through a lot playing with them. And so, you have to value that with Clark Phillips, and just as well, you just see that he played with Devin Lloyd before. They're going to have familiarity there. Maybe that calms down Lloyd a little bit on the defense. Maybe you get value there. That's probably reaching a bit, but I like Clark Phillips as a prospect. I think he is just a really good guy you can bring in. So we'll move on to our next guy, Luke Musgrave. So Musgrave, for me, is kind of your fallback plan at tight end. I think this team needs to address the tight end spot in the draft. I think that has to happen. The ideal thing for Jacksonville is to have a 2 tight end system because that's what Doug Peterson wants to utilize. That's a huge part of his offense. You go watch the tape from Philly, that's what you're going to find. And Luke Musgrave, well, he's not a player who's exactly like overly dominant in one thing. He doesn't have a big flaw to his game. He's just a really well-rounded tight end. So if you bring him into Jacksonville, there's going to be development that needs to take place, but instantly you have an upgrade at the run blocking, upgrade in pass blocking as well, I would argue, and he has the ability to become a good receiver. And so you see here on stats, you're probably like 169 yards receiving. That's nothing. Well, he was injured this last year. That's a part of it for him and something you got to consider. And I guess for Trent Baalke, maybe that's a plus because he likes drafting injured guys, but I digress. So I think if you cannot get either Michael Mayer or Darnell Washington in this draft, I think this is where you go. I think that Doug Peterson has every capability needed to develop him. There's no big physical limitations to him. The only thing you'll see mentioned here is the play strength. So maybe he needs to add on a little bit of size. But, I mean, you already see still, he's a big guy at 250. Musgrave, I think you've got to like him. And so that's a guy I'm probably considering probably day 2. Ideally in the 2nd or 3rd round of this draft. I don't think he should go in the 1st. I think he's someone who could fall to this team in the 2nd round. So definitely a name you're going to hear a lot about, name you're going to need to consider this offseason. So let's get to the back half of this. So we've got 5 guys left. B.J. Ojulari. It's the first guy we're going to talk about. If you're looking for a really good pass rusher in this draft that could be available at 2024, this is your guy. He has to be. B.J. Ojulari is among the best in college right now as far as pass rusher, and the moves he has a huge arsenal. And what's even better about it is the creativity he has in his style of play. We're going to watch one of his pass rushes that stood out to me, and we'll also mention another movie he made that was really impressive and shows you that creativity. When you look at how he fits into Jacksonville, he instantly comes in as your pass rush specialist. He's probably not a 3-down guy right off the bat. You want to develop him against the run. You probably want to mentor him a bit, have him sit behind guys. But he's already one of your best pass rushers. He's got a ton of moves. I think if he pans out like you expect, he really rivals about any pass rusher on this team. He's better than Trayvon Walker right off the bat. And against Josh Allen, that really just comes down to whether Josh Allen takes a big step forward or not. But the good thing with B.J. Ojulari is, while we talk about him being this great pass rusher, he's probably going to be available for the Jaguars at 24. And there's a chance that Ojulari may fall into the 2nd round a ways. So maybe this team trades up for him. But he's a natural leader. It's another thing you're going to like about him. One thing that could prevent him from going to the Jaguars is size. It's not all ideal. You wish it was a little different. That's the one thing you just can't change. You can change the strength, you can change the weight, the muscle, but you can't change your height. You can't change your wingspan, any of those things. You know, unless you're like living in a Mayan civilization and you're, you know, like 3 months old or something, and they're stretching your forehead or whatever. That's a stupid comparison, but we'll go ahead and just pretend I didn't mention that. So, B.J. Ojulari. Let's get a clip in here. So this is against Florida. You'll see him highlighted here. And so this is a spin move that he pulls off. So we'll watch that real quick. Yeah. So while that's not a sack, you see he beats the tackle immediately. The guy doesn't see it coming. And what's even better about this, he's not just going to go back to that move right after. He's not just going to keep spamming the same thing if it works once. For example, there was another game where Ojulari, you probably don't see this very often in NFL games, but he did a fake spin move on a guy. I mean, he shows creativity in the way he plays, and he shows that he can be an extremely impressive pass rusher at the next level if he can put it all together. And I'll tell you one thing, just because he plays on the edge and he's from LSU, do not think this guy is another Caleb Chase on. I think it's extremely unfair to him. I get why people feel that way looking at anyone from LSU now, but he's a different guy. You know, I wish Chase on worked out. Actually, this might damn me forever, but I wanted them to draft Chase on. But, you know, it just hasn't worked out at this level. So let's get to our last four guys here. Osiris Torrence, probably someone that a lot of people are going to love because of the Florida Gators logo. So outside of that, though, when you're looking up the definition of a run mauler in this NFL draft, Osiris Torrence might be at the very top of that list. And for an offensive line that, like we've talked about, needs that run mauler, needs the guys who can get this rushing attack going with a really good running back, he fits great for that reason. And so, you know, it's not only that too, but I think you need a big guy inside to go up against people like Chris Jones. It just was not getting done this last year, and we saw it twice, and I think that's one of those things you have to look at as a problem that needs to be addressed. It's stopping a guy like Chris Jones, being able to guard great tight ends like Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews. This team has to find answers to that. And I mean, for like Kelce, I think a lot of that comes down to the linebackers playing better, the communication issues. Slot corner helps a bit. But, you know, the problem on the offensive line, you know, maybe you say Ben Barch is good enough, and he played pretty well in his 5 games, but that's not a huge sample size. So I think it's open to upgrades at that position. So everything you'll love about Osiris Torrence, well, he's played left guard in college. He's a guy who can also play right guard for his team. He can play either position. And so, you know, you've got to like that about him. The way he plays, he's got a strong anchor. He's a physical player. He's just going to add something that you're going to need more of on this offensive line. However, with that said, as much as I like him at guard, there's another person that I would rather draft for that position and as a swing tackle on this team if he is available at the 24th overall pick. And you're welcome to disagree with me. It's a different opinion. But the next guy on this list, Dawand Jones. You're probably going to like him, especially if you watch the Senior Bowl this last week. But the take of him being a guard is a little bit different. You know, people are looking at Dawand Jones as a tackle, and he absolutely has the ability to play that, and he showed it at the Senior Bowl. We'll see this in one of his reps. I think it's against Isaiah Foskey we're going to look at. But Dawand Jones, ton of capability, but the biggest thing about him that you cannot match with any other prospect, no one in the NFL, is his size. This dude is 6'8". 6'8". And his wingspan is like 89.5 inches. I cannot put into words how hard it is to get around a man who is that big and is 380 pounds but moves like he's 300. If you want to see what I mean, go watch the Senior Bowl highlights from him. But because my gosh, this dude is going to be a monster at the next level. And I'll tell you what, if he's on the board for the Jaguars at 24, I'd be kind of disappointed if they didn't select him and he fell to a team like the Chiefs or Bengals. That's the last thing that I want to see this defensive line have to go up against. I'd rather have him on our side. So, the way I see with Dawand Jones, he can absolutely play tackle, but the way I want to approach this offseason right now, and my opinions will probably change a bit as the months go on. Cam Robinson, probably going to keep him. Maybe you trade him. That is an option, depending on how you feel about Walker Little and if you're committed to drafting another swing tackle if you start Walker Little. So maybe that's on the board, but you got a left tackle already. And your right tackle is Jawan Taylor. And I think this team is going to find a way to re-sign him. The more I've looked at it with the capital that they have, I think that there is absolutely a path to where the Jaguars can bring back all of these guys. And probably the biggest reason why is because you look at the salary cap for 2024 and it's nearly $100 million available. You can push so much cap space down the road. And it's not $100 million available because all these players are leaving. It's $100 million available because you don't got a lot of guys to resign. You got two big names in all of it. It's Calvin Ridley and Josh Allen. You've got some other guys, Devon Hamilton, Ben Barch, Tyler Shatley, but you can kick a ton of money down the road, still have the same team, and have enough money to re-sign all of them. So I think the tackle spots are resolved. And because of that, I see the issue at left guard. Why not throw in Dawand Jones at left guard for this team? Put a monster in the middle of the field. Put him up against Chris Jones. Put him up against the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL. He might have to learn for a little bit, but by the time the playoffs come around, I think that guy is going to be a huge asset to this team. So, I love that idea. And long term, he probably does move to tackle somewhere. Maybe he takes right tackle away eventually if you want to move on from Taylor. Or takes over left tackle if Walker Little costs too much long term, or they move on from Cam Robinson. Or maybe he is a left guard long term. But I think he's got the versatility to play all over. And this is the kind of rare prospect that I could see this team loving. You look at what Trent Baalke drafts. He drafts the guys with size. He drafts the freaks. Trayvon Walker is the chief example of that. Like we've said, this is another chief example, except he will probably be there at 25 or 24. I hope he is, because I think that would be a great selection for this team. But we'll move on, show this clip of him first, so you can get to enjoy what others got to enjoy watching this last week. So this is against, let's see, it's a different pass rusher. This is not Isaiah Foskey. But you see here, his wingspan is comparable to someone who is 7'5". You just see him dominate this guy here. Throws him down. He's got that kind of power. He can do that against anyone, and you can see other clips as well against like Isaiah Foskey. There was another first-round pass rusher. I can't remember what his name was, but you see top prospects going up against him, and there's nothing they can do. So you gotta love it. And I think that's a player they absolutely have to be considering right now, and I think they're going to fall in love with him before the draft. So let's get to our last two guys. Brian Branch. This will be a fantastic first-round pick. The only problem you're going to have with Branch is, are you going to draft a nickel corner in the first round? That's it. Yeah, maybe you say man coverage is somewhat of an issue, but if you're watching video on Brian Branch, all you're going to see is how damn good of a player this is. This guy is a monster for nickel corner. So he's played beforehand primarily at safety, but this last year they made a change and moved him to nickel corner, and He was dominant there. He did everything you would ask a nickel corner to do at a high level. You need him to defend the run. He can defend the run really well. You need him to make a big hit, jar the ball loose. He can do that. You need him to cover well. He can cover well. He does it all. And not only that, but as a person, he's a great fit in Jacksonville. He's got a high IQ, as you see here, but as a person, this is a humble guy. This isn't an egotistical man just because he's great at the game. He will fit into this team seamlessly. So you gotta love it. You gotta love it with Brian Branch. So if you want to see good film on him or more enjoyable film, obviously you gotta watch it all if you want to have a fair take on him. But his last game in Alabama is a great game to watch. I think he had a sack and an interception in it, but that man was all over the field, just delivering big hits. You saw everything he can be at the next level. And so, Brian Branch, I think as far as how he fits with Jacksonville, he instantly comes in as your slot corner. It's where he's going to start. I think on the plays where they're not playing with the slot corner, you could see him rotate around as a safety. Something to consider. You may look at slot corner as not a huge need. However, slot corner is on the field for Jacksonville roughly 75% of the time during games. That was a statistic we looked into about 2 months ago now, when we were evaluating Trey Herndon, and it's a big part of this defense. So Brian Branch will not be sitting on the bench for the majority of games. He's going to be on the field for you a lot. The only thing he's going to do is cause Trey Herndon to sit on the bench. And, Trey Herndon, well, he's done okay at nickel corner. You need to do better there. You got to improve there because there were games where he just could not match up. And I think he's just a great value as a backup guy, and that's what you got to use him as. So, Brian Branch, great fit for this team. I could see him going in the first round of them. I'd be thrilled to see him go in the first round. With that said, he is not my favorite prospect in this draft. My favorite prospect in this draft is Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington. He's just, you can't compare him to any other tight end. The closest guy that has played that position that you can even recall is Brandon Pettigrew from the Detroit Lions, who was 10 pounds less and 2 inches shorter. It's a big difference. 2 inches is a lot in the NFL. 10 pounds, not as much as the 2 inches, but it's something. Darnell Washington is a beast. I think he's, if I remember right, actually look at this as we can. Make sure I get this right. I think he's 6'7". He's nearly as tall as Dawand Jones and 270 pounds. He's a big guy. In Washington, well, he wasn't the lead receiver at tight end for the Georgia Bulldogs. When he had his opportunities to play on the field, he made a huge impact. He's an elite run blocker, elite pass blocker, all of those things right off the bat. They had him lined up for plays against Will Anderson. And he didn't dominate Will Anderson. I'm not going to say that because it didn't happen. And Will Anderson is Will Anderson. He's probably the best prospect in this draft, if not Jalen Carter. But he was still able to go up against Will Anderson as a tight end and block for this team. What tight ends do that? There's not a whole lot. So as a blocker, right off the bat, what you add to this team, you upgrade from Evan Ingram, who is willing but not an extremely able blocker, to someone you can rely on in pretty much any situation to block for you. So your run game immediately is improved a ton, drastically. Your pass protection is improved drastically. And you don't have to worry when you're throwing him on the field about the defense knowing, okay, well, this is a run play because of this. He's a well-rounded player. He doesn't just do one thing. And yeah, the pass catching part of his game is right now what you would call the weakest part. But he's still capable. And we'll actually see in some of these clips we look at, we've got two, that he's very, very capable of making big catches. He's a contested catch guy. He can do that. He can make difficult catches. If you see all that and you get him involved with the team as a big part of your offensive plan, I think Jacksonville has 2 tight ends that are top 10 in the league. Whether it's the first year or not, I think that you could add another huge receiving threat there, add another capable player, and you have a monster of a tight end position, a 2-head monster to be exact. So you just got to love what he brings to this team. And once again, we'll talk about Trent Baalke, how he's going to feel about that. I mean, can you imagine? He's huge on the athleticism for these guys, the size, the frame, the strength, all those things. And Darnell Washington is all of those combined and more. When I first watched him play, and this isn't to say he's exactly like this player, but the guy I was instantly reminded of was Travis Kelce. And I say that because it's just a mismatch for teams. The size is just obnoxious. You pretty much trust him when he's lined up against someone that he can make the catch. If you put the ball in right, he can absolutely do it. He's a monster running around the field. He's hard to bring down. He's a really good blocker. I think he compares pretty well. But, I'm not going to say he's as good as Travis Kelce because, hey, he's got to do that. And even at my highest projection, Travis Kelce is still the best tight end in NFL history. So, got to consider that. I'm not saying he's going to be the best in the league, but I think when you put him with Doug Peterson, who is known to be able to develop tight ends, he revived Evan Ingram's career this last year. Can you imagine what kind of monster he would create at that position? I could not. I couldn't possibly imagine. So that's why I want to see this happen. And I would be even fine taking him in the first round. I said it. I think that would be okay. Ideally, what you want to do, the way I feel about it right now, I think you want to go after best player available first round. Hopefully that's Dawand Jones. And then I'd be fine trading up in the second. Go get him. But say that Michael Mayer flies off the board early. Maybe you take Darnell Washington at 24. And I think that would be just fine if this team went that route. So watch a couple clips on him to wrap this up. So this first one, see him hurdle a man in this. So for your viewing entertainment. Darnell Washington's number 0 coming across here. See him shrug off the tackle. Hurdle. You see what I mean? He's just hard to bring down. Almost impossible to bring down. Watch it here one more time. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing to be impressed by. And there's not a ton of those videos because he's just not been on the field a ton for Georgia. Not just because of injury, but just because they have Brock Bowers on that team. So I don't know if we've got another video here. Might not, actually. This might be it. Yep, so you see a contested, not contested, but adjusted for the catch over the middle. Hard to bring down. Nearly gets into the end zone on that play. You can see the mismatch on the field. You can see a little bit of what I mean with Kelce. I'm sure you can find differences in their games. They're not exactly the same, but this is a prospect that is entirely different from anything we've seen. So making a comp is going to be hard for him. But those are my guys. Let me know what you think about him. If you've got any other guys you want to talk about, I'd be more than glad to talk about. Enjoy talking about all this stuff. Draft is honestly my favorite part of the entire offseason and one of my favorite parts of the entire year. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to see on this channel. Thanks for taking your time today to watch this, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.